We now have a definition of service management, and now we need to figure out how we fit into this whole role of service management. Chris, take us through the parties and the roles and how everybody plays their important part in this.
Yeah, I always use the example of, you know who Dwayne Johnson is, right?
The Rock.
The Rock, that's right. And so for many of you who have ever watched, The Rock in movies, you know that, hey, he was also a professional wrestler before he got into the film and all that. And, he was what they call in the word kind of a heel. He was kind of a bad guy, but everybody loved him because he had these great lines, like, are you smelling what the Rock is cooking? And one of my favorite ones is typically he would do something and the audience would boo him or something like that. And he'd get up on the ropes and he'd point at me, he'd say, know your role and shut your mouth. Now, I'm not saying that to you guys, so just understand that. But in other words, he was saying, look, you have a role. You're the audience. You just watch me do my amazing stuff. Well, we would say that in the world of ITIL and IT service management is that there are roles that we have, and you need to understand in any type of situation, you are either, as we would say, at least from IT service management, you're either a provider or a consumer. So let's break these down. The important one is probably the service consumer. This is a general role that we have, a generic role, we would say. The same with service provider. A service provider provides, right? And so we understand that. But the interesting thing is that when you look at a service consumer, you can actually break these down into 3 sub-roles. Now, by the way, these are important, especially for the ITIL Foundation exam. And so make sure you kind of take a note of each one. In particular is going to be the first one we look at, which is the customer. The reason why is that in the sub-role of a customer, you have an organization that takes on the role of a consumer, so they're consuming the products and services. Well, the role of the customer is very important because they are the one, either a single person, he or she, or it can be actually a group of people making a decision. And so the customer is the one that defines the requirements for the service and, very important, takes responsibility for the outcome of those services and that come in based upon the requirements that they give. And the reason why is pretty easy, right, Scott?
Right.
Because if I come to you and I say I'm a consumer, right, and I'm a customer, and I say, hey, I want something that does A, B, and C, and you go, got it, I got it. A, B, C, here you go. Here's A, B, and C. And then I come back to you and go, oh, wow, it didn't turn out right. Actually, maybe I should have asked for X, Y, and Z. Now, who is responsible for that outcome? Not the provider.
No,
it's not Scott, it's me, right? Because I gave him requirements, he fulfilled those requirements. And so that's why it's very important to know you're talking to the right person and to work with these. Remember how we talked about value is co-created? That means that we're talking, and that means that we're working together. Well, okay, so we see that. So we have the customer, very important. So if I'm the kind of note taker where I usually put a little asterisk or star next to something. I would definitely do that next to the customer. Then we have users. Well, oh wait, I thought we were just talking about that. Well, there's a difference between a customer and a user. Users, and I'm not knocking them, they simply use it. So they don't define the requirements. They might have some input. If you're a good customer, you talk to your people. But for the most part, they show up, they get it. A good example of that would be like your email. I doubt many of you were asked about whether you want to use Outlook or Gmail or whatever at your company. You were just told, this is what we're using. And you're like, okay, as long as I get my email, right? You're simply a user. Meanwhile, at we would say the higher levels, somebody in the IT operations or in, whoever makes those decisions said, I like we're a Microsoft shop, so we're going to do Outlook. Okay, sounds good. We're using Exchange, either whether it's up in the cloud or it's on-prem, but that's what we're doing. Or you went to a company and they said, we don't want to deal with that. Why not use Gmail? It just works. Okay, then they're using that. See the difference? Somebody comes up with what the requirements are. We don't want to have any equipment. We just want it out in the cloud. It's a lot less expensive than, we'll say Microsoft is, or it's, we like Outlook better. They made the requirements, but you get your email and you say, okay, I just use the product or service. That's the difference between a customer and a user. I spent a little bit of time on that just because I want to make sure you know and understand the difference. Very important. Now, the last one is also an important one, and that is the sponsor. Now, the sponsor can be sometimes the customer, but typically, you find that people have to go and they have to talk to the big finance people. Now, I know, Scott, for a while, you were kind of the finance guy, right?
True. That's true. Yeah.
So,
write the checks.
Yeah, he's the one who's like, okay, I sign it. So imagine if I come to you, Scott, and I say, all right, hey, there's this great deal on this product and service, and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I go, yeah, and it meets our requirements. It's only 15 grand a month. And Scott goes, well, let me look at the budget. You know what? We can do 10, but we can't do 15, right? So why is that? Well, because he is the finance guy. He is the one, we would say, technically sponsoring the signing of the checks and doing those things. Now, that can come down to, depending on the size of a company, that could be just one person doing all of this, or it can be, well, you've got 3 people, or you have to go through before you talk to the guy that actually signs the checks. Hopefully, the customer and the sponsor communicate well, so that way, obviously, we're all on the same page. But each of these roles may have different and sometimes even conflicting expectations of each other. So we always have to be looking out for it. So one of the easiest ways to kind of remember sponsor and what the sponsor does is notice that S. Now this works really well for us here in the United States, but that S, if you just put 2 lines through it, it turns into a dollar sign.
Absolutely does.
And so guess what? Do that and you'll never forget, oh, what's the role of the sponsor?
Money.
Money, 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 right? Customer, requirements, responsible for the outcome, users simply use, okay? So that's the role. Now we have kind of an example here to kind of drive this home because that's what we do. We have, of course, a company trying to get mobile phones, okay, which, happens. Typically it's going to be because, you have your BYOD, bring your own device, right? And people are bringing cell phones into sometimes secure facilities. I'll never forget, Scott, walking into AFRICOM headquarters out in Germany. I was teaching a class and working with them out there. And I walked in, and there's a guard there, real guard, real gun, and he says, yes, thank you, sir, good to have you with us. I need your phone, I need your computer, I need your, even my watch, because I have a smart watch. He goes, it'll be all put in this locker, here's your key when you come back. And I was like, but how am I going to teach my class? And he says, well, do you have your slides on a CD that we can scan and do a security check on? I go, well, yeah. And so that's how I taught my class. They provided it. Why? Because it was a highly secure environment, and you can't just have people bring in their own device. Okay, background for what we're talking about here. Let's say the company says, look, the way that we're going to control this is we will buy your phones. We will provide the service. And so let's say that the customer is going to be, in this case, this is kind of high. I think the CIO typically doesn't make decisions like that, but hey, we'll go with it. Chief Information Officer, along with key communication team members, sit down and they say, all right, well, what do we need? We need phones, right? We need the service. We want unlimited data. We want some sort of warranty on the phones because people tend to drop their phones and we don't want to just keep paying for new phones. So this is what we want, okay? Those are the customers. They go to, I'll just pick one randomly, Verizon here in the States, EE in the UK, or, whatever your, one that you have in your country. So this wireless provider says, all right, sounds good. We can do this for, $10,000 a month. That includes phones and the service and everything because you've got, 1,000 employees, yada, 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 whatever it is. Okay, here's the thing. all of those employees, including the CIO, including the communication members, are going to be users because they will use that service. They're going to get a phone. They're going to, maybe they go to a portal, right, that we'll say Verizon puts up for the company, and they go in, they go, oh, I want this phone. You can get either an Apple, or they can get a Samsung or a Google phone. They can pick which one. So they do that, and they get the phone. They use the phone. The sponsor, though, is going to be, notice, the CFO. The CFO is going to say, all right, we're going to take a look at this. And again, $10,000, that's a little pricey for our budget this year. We can maybe do 8. And so then what happens? The customer, because they define the requirements, go, we're going to have to go back to the service provider and say, yeah, that's great, but what can you do for $8,000? And the guy goes, well, let's see. Tell you what, do you need brand new spanking top-of-the-line phones? No, not really. What about last year's model? Oh, well, then we can do 8,000 because that's working for them. So that's where that give and take happen in using the customer, the user, and the sponsor. Now, all of these people live there, Scott, in something called an organization. Now, what's interesting is that organizations can be a single person, like Chris Ward LLC, actually the name of a company that I have. I know, not very original though.
Not very original.
Not very original. You got we got Passion IT Group.
Great names.
Great names. Mine actually was because I was in a very big hurry and I was filling out the paperwork, and I just I need something. I put it down, and so that's why. But guess what? I am the one and only employee of Chris Ward LLC, so I can't fire myself, which is some days I'm really seriously considering doing that. So as we would say, organizations are essentially a group of individuals, can be a single person or a group of people that have its own functions with responsibilities and authorities and relationships to achieve an objective. In other words, we organize to accomplish something. And what we see here is that organizations obviously can be big, they can be small. However, they are going to either take on a role of service provider or service consumer, depending on what it is they're trying to accomplish. And so the thing is that, when you look at this, and you're, not necessarily in the ITIL 4 Foundation course, but really when you get into some of the more specialist areas, intermediate level areas, especially digital and IT strategy, is you really need to define okay, wait, this organization is the consumer, this organization is the provider. Based upon that, certain criteria need to be met in order for that value co-creation, and thus the need for digital and IT strategy, which, by the way, you should check out that course, which we offer here at Passion IT Group. It's a great course, especially if you're in senior leadership. Those of you out there that are taking this, and this is kind of your first step into it, if you're into that director, senior VP level, definitely plan on taking the digital and IT strategy course. You're going to really love it. Okay, so we have that. That means, though, that an organization by itself is not really all that much. You need to have capability. Now, capability is the ability of an organization. So I like this about, if you have to define it. Capability, it actually has the word in there. Ability, right? Capability. The ability of an organization, person, process, application, configuration item, or IT service to carry out an activity. And so we kind of hinted at some of these: management, organization, process, knowledge, people, experiences, and skills. If you don't have that, if you merely have resources, right? You don't have capabilities, it's not going to work. It doesn't work if you're the service provider, and it doesn't work if you're the service consumer. If I don't have the capability of either receiving, accepting, consuming, or turning around and creating, providing, and supporting, there is no relationship, there is no value, there is no co-creation. So that's why organizations do need to have resources, yes, but ultimately, Scott, capabilities are going to be important. As it says here, the greater their ability to consistently produce quality services depends on the maturity of their capabilities. And so that is a whole nother course that we talk about.
There you go. All right. So, Chris, we've talked about the roles as they fit into service management. And as we move on, we're going to now move on to value proposition and creating value. And we will see you over there.